All right, to start another project, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make this really big wall unit. Now this is going to go upstairs, so it's going to be a little bit of a trick, but this is going to be 2 cabinets for this one particular part. There's an upper and a lower cabinet. Now there's a second cabinet job as well, and that's going to be this one here. This cabinet happens to be 9 feet long, and it goes in the same room as the other cabinet. And cut all these guys using my diagrams, and then after it's all done, I can start cutting everything, to size, and then do all the joinery on it. But you have seen all these videos at this point, so you probably know my procedure for doing this. And if there's anything I want you to see specifically, I'll go ahead and stop the build and explain what I'm doing. But I'm going to go ahead and bust these out, and I'll get back to you in a little bit. So now I've got this piece balancing on this block. Now I can go ahead and tilt it onto the workbench. And you can just tell how heavy that is. If I didn't have that block there, or if it was just a regular wood block, it would slide. But because it's got the sandpaper on it, it doesn't slide. Lift up here. And of course I want to use my legs as much as possible, but my pushing here is going to really help. So that's, nothing. Very doable for one person, and even with 2 people, maneuvering these guys is pretty tough. Okay, this is just mocked up, and I just wanted to make sure that it was good. Everything fits. It's about 9:30 at night, and that looks really good. So yeah, you can't see in there, but it looks nice. You can see here what the joint looks like. So I make it a 1/2 inch deep. This is a 1/2 inch ultralight, which is a little less than 1/2 inch. So there always is a little lip. That's cool. And that's it. And you can see how I stagger these. So try not to overload the 3/4 inch material, so at least stagger them. When you sight down here, it's always a good idea just to do that, because it'll really tell you a lot about what's happening. You know, like one of the sides is up higher than the other. So if that's the case, if your workbench is not flat, then it works really well. All right, great place to stop for the night. And I'm gonna reconvene tomorrow. We've got a lot of work to do. When I'm done with the face frame cutting, ripping, I have everything in order here, right? So I start with my shortest pieces, and then I move to my longest piece. This edge on the right side is the jointed edge. The left side is the sawn edge. And that means that this sawn edge goes up against the fence on the miter saw. And you want to make sure that you keep the tear out on the side that's got the saw marks. Now these pieces were just cut to length, and they were just pocketed. So what I need to do is clean off all the saw marks on that particular side, and also the tear out from cutting it to length. So clean both of these up with one pass in the joiner. And any internal divider is going to need that same thing done to it. So I'm going to use 1-inch screws at the top because it's close to the edge, and I'm only using one screw. It's a little tough sometimes because they'll want to spin out on you, but hopefully that glue will tack up fast. But it's better than breaking out the wood. So I find that using 1-inch screws when you're dealing with narrow pieces, plus I have the hole extra close to the inside edge. You may be able to do 2 screws here, but definitely use 1-inch long. Used the actual cabinet to determine where the bottom rail was. So I made a mark there, about a 1/16 of an inch up or so, maybe a strong 1/16. And I don't like to the bottom shelves or any shelves to be flush. I don't think that looks good. This guy with my little mark there, making sure that it's nice and tight down here at the top, and I can line up right there so it just barely matches that mark I already made on the stiles. So now I can take this to the saw, spin it around, so this is facing the fence, right? So this is the bad side, and now that's going to be my mark. So I can take it, put my stop up, because I have a whole bunch of these, right? I've got like 6 of them to do because of there's 2 different cabinets, and they're all going to be the same. So I'm going to make that mark, cut it, make sure we're good, and then we'll be good to go to make all the rest of them. And that looks like it's really perfect. Great. So we can use this as our spacer now, no problem. The inch sometimes don't cause your wood to slide as much. You know what I mean? When you use pocket screws, sometimes it slides. So yeah, try 1-inch screws. You might like it. It's actually, you know, I don't think a lot of people really consider 1-inch screws when they think of this type of joinery. So it's nice to have this track over there, even though I'm not over here all the time. It's nice to be able to use it if you want it. All right. That 1-inch bites too. Bites real nicely. We're going to use a shaker set to make these doors. Big surprise, huh? That's what we're using. All right, I'm going to go ahead and do the cope first, and then this is going to be for the stiles. So this is called the sticking bit. Cope and stick. So this is it right here, the door style. So you can see that set up. So this distance here and this distance here are kind of arbitrary. Just as long as this groove right here, the front of it or the top of it, however you want to look at it, from the front of the door, the setback there, you want that groove and here to be equal or less than your panel thickness. In this case, we're using a 3/8 panel so that I can have a nice thicker panel and not like, you know, a thin 1/4-inch panel. You know, I'm going to go with something like this, and that's going to mean I have to go like that. Now, if I take this over, and you can see that right there, you see how that's set in? So that's nice. And so raise your router until that bottom lip right there is 5/16 or even with my spacer. And you can use a ruler to get that. However you want to use it. You can use a setup gauge. You can use a piece of wood that's 5/16 thick. You can use setup gauges. I have a 3/16 right here, and I can take my 1/8 and just stack them up and take that right to the router bit, and then I know I'm exactly at. But these are perfect for this job. Equal or just barely in front of the bearing. So it's pretty close to where that bearing is, in the middle down there. So get these set up before you lock your fence in, because when you adjust these, you're probably going to change the depth. The stick bit, see this? How you can see the bearing? Well, that's easy to set up, but this one's buried, this particular set. And every time you run these, you have to do this, because pretty much you're going to take the Sharpie off as you use the bit. But now I've got that mark right there, the Sharpie, and I can see when that spins, I know I'm contacting the, I mean, I'm barely touching it, hardly touching it. So that's good right there. Push block goes, I use a really simple push block. This is my push block right here. Now I have two profiles that I can run. This one being the shaker and this one being a bead right there. And now, because I do equal amount of these guys, I like to have these dual, you know, I have tons of these, but using this push block, see how it's angled? I actually prefer to run it this way, and that's because, you know, it's just a little more comfortable. So if you want to switch these around as you're running them, that's cool. I mean, I'm totally fine doing it like this, but if you're doing a lot of them, you might want to switch this around and just use the push block in the reverse way like that. It'll naturally give you a little bit better feel on it. But I've come to like doing it like this, so I'm good here. Whatever you like though. But I love doing rails like this without, you know, using any clamps or anything. I just use my grippy gloves to clamp everything down with my fingers. Run this face down, and as you run this through, you know, just keep it nice and tight. Now obviously your fingers are away from the cutter obviously at all times. And you'll notice as I finish this cut, I come through it and it finishes right there. You see, that's as far as I need to go. I don't need to go all the way through, right? I just need to finish the cut and then pull it away. So my fingers really, it's not a question of going right by the bit. And even if I did, it's like I'd have to really stress my fingers out to reach there. So it's not a big deal to me. I feel very comfortable doing it like this. I do like it here because if something were to fly up, it's going to block it. It also creates better dust collection as well. So, you know, I think it's in a great spot. But you know, do as you want to do, whatever you feel comfortable with. Slide it up in position. Fence stays exactly where it's at. No need to touch it. And now all we're doing is taking one of these pieces that you just ran, the scrap pieces just like this, and you're going to line up the cutter. Now this has two cutters, top and a bottom, because they're stacked to adjust for the width of the groove. So what you want to do is just align one of them. So you could align the top or the bottom one with the tongue here. So what I'm going to do is align this bottom cutter right at that bottom edge of it and align it with the bottom of the tongue. That's it. Get that thing lined up. If it was good, it would slide in there real easily. I'm going to have to adjust it. You can see the lip right here. That means this part has to be deeper. So I have to raise the blade. Now that guy right there, you can see that? That's perfect. Perfect. All right, we go with that. I work with the shaper, and this works great with the shaper, but it also works really well with the router too, because this is this area here is perfect for a lot of profiles that come beyond the fence. This particular one doesn't come beyond, and I should say it comes beyond, but it doesn't come above the work piece that I'm actually routing. So here is completely flush, so I can put the regular one on and then not worry about it. I just want to show you this as an option. But check this out. I mean, if you're concerned, or if you just want to have, you know, absolute comfort as you're using this, you don't want to actually see the router bit. And I also have this cover, so I spin this around and reverse this, so I'm able to put this piece down, covering up the back edge. So if I want to use it in the front, I can just spin it around. I've made that adapter plate to go on there. But so that's it. Take these guys. Now, look at that. All right, so now we've got downward pressure on this, and it's completely blocking the fence. Now, if you feel like it's too much pressure, all you have to do is just release this and then tighten it back up, and then we'll release the pressure there. And then if you feel like there's not enough pressure, just do the opposite. But pretty cool. And like I said, if you want to extend this out, you could put spacers, or you can make a block like this, or you could just use spacers behind there. They work equally well. So I just ran a bunch of these, but I'm going to go ahead and run some more, and I'm going to use this just so I can show you what that's like. All right, that was great. So next time you route this type of stuff, maybe you want to use this hold down rather than using like feather boards and all that stuff. This is, well, in my opinion, it's a really good thing to do, and it's super simple. I mean, as long as you have T-tracks, it makes it a lot easier. Now, if you're making doors and you've got 3/8 panels or 1/2-inch panels, you're going to have to rabbet this out because the panel is too thick for the groove. 1/4-inch groove. You need to make the tongue 1/4-inch. This profile is not square, if you notice. There's a curve there. So this is actually a really cool bit, and it's probably something that, you know, maybe you haven't heard of before, but this is called a bowl cutting bit, and I actually use this to make my back panel rabbet. So it's kind of a cool, it's a cool back cutter bit for me. Okay, I've switched to my 5-inch sander, and I'm going to sand all this. Even though they were jointed, I'm going to sand it nice and smooth. And then I'm going to use my inline sander, and I'm going to cut the edges. So if you have a lot of doors to do, that you do a lot, or you have things that you need, like shelves that need their corners knocked off, you could definitely use like this type of block, and that works great. But you can also use this guy, and this is a phenomenal sander. It takes a little getting used to. I stop about 3 inches short of the bottom so that it doesn't drip down. All right, I have to flush trim this with a V-groove. Got to be very careful when you do this, not to tilt the router. There's no little bumps. Sometimes you get little bumps that are imperceivable, but as soon as you paint this, you'll see them. And if there was any kind of bump here, it'll transfer to the wood. So, or if you have any movement in your hand, it's best to just take care of them. And trust me, they're there. Okay, now you can see the stairs. We gotta come up, turn again. So it's going to be very interesting. So might as well put it on video, right? see, the advantage of doing this. Now we know that this wall is not going to bulge from this point up, so we're good. We can set this tight to the wall, get this guy level, and then just continue it out. I'm going to do some scribing. I got to cut this line right there very carefully with my jigsaw, and then if I need to, fine tune it with my belt sander. So basically what I did was, because this interior is going to be covered, all I wanted to do is focus on this area. So this is the area where I want it to be nice and tight, but then here I actually brought it in. I don't care about it. All I care about is this. Being tight to the wall just like it is. I center line and tight here. So we're good. Now so this is what I'm looking for. Tight. And this area is tight, right? So any area that I wanted to stay really tight to the line is tight. But then here I just said forget it, right? I don't care about this interior part. All right? Just plow through it, put it on the most aggressive. Right on our line. Make sure I can see that line, and then same thing there. And then we'll let this down. Nice. Very good. Alright, now this guy's good. The only thing left to do is secure it to the wall. And since we know where the studs are because we laid them out before we put the top up, we've got our marks. So we can just measure up. Okay, the next thing is I got to measure for all the molding, and I'm going to pretty much cut everything at the shop because I have to make the counter anyways. So I'm actually going to do all the cuts at the shop. So I'll measure for the crown and then base. I'm going to be cutting this long, really long, thick piece. It's real heavy. So I decided to make my extension even longer. So I actually added 3 screws to my workbench and extended it, essentially pulling it away from the normal spot. Now, this is really strong, right? Let's see how this is going to push here. And that's pretty good. So I would say that's a success. All right, that worked great, that extension. This is what I'm gonna do, is connect these two, and I just picked the best joint out of the two, and this was the best one. So I am gonna put some blue tape underneath because it's gonna help avoid some squeeze out. All right, this is pretty straightforward. I'm gonna use these guys just to protect the wood as I'm clamping this way, because I wanna put a lot of pressure on this guy. So I'm gonna go pretty tight and just utilize the strength of these Bessies, because I'm gonna pull it together using this and I don't want it to lift up. Of yellow glue on this guy. I wanna make sure that it is very covered. The joint is very covered. Seal at this front because it's gonna overhang the cabinet and I don't want the bottom to have a void. So definitely want that to be tight. And if you feel it's not going to squeeze out enough, just add more right at the top, just to be certain. So this should be nice and flush, the front. So you can see all that glue squeeze out. That's what we want. Okay. And I'm just watching this bottom edge. I want to make sure that that gets nice and tight and it doesn't curl up as you're clamping it, because naturally it'll tend to do that. Really tight. I don't want that guy to move. I don't want this to fall. So that looks good right there. I have all the confidence in the world that that's going to be good. Okay, one thing I noticed is that this particular ultralight MDF is actually a different tone than this one, which is kind of interesting. But it all sanded really nice, and I think that this is going to be a nice joint. I went ahead, sanded this front and the sides. Of course, left the back because that's going to be scribed. And I went ahead and sanded this with my 6-inch. Made sure to blend it really well. So I went all the way out. I didn't just go where the joint is, right? And anybody who's ever gone to a lumber yard to pick up material, only to get back to the shop and realize that the material is no good, and or the material was delivered to you. Either way, you get it and the material is no good. So I'm pretty upset about this because this is shoe molding, and this guy, it's all rippled. Okay, so whenever they milled this up, they completely botched the run, and you can't have a rippled piece of molding like this, shoe molding especially, because when you paint this, the entire cabinet bottom is going to be rippled. That's unacceptable. But this is actually kind of hard to sand. What I do in this situation is I utilize my tracks to hold the molding, and this is pine, so it's kind of soft. It's not going to sand too badly. I mean, it's not like a real hardwood like maple. It's going to sand decently, but it's not going to be that fast. These are pretty deep ripples. So instead of doing that, I'm actually going to use my random orbital sander, and I'm going to work it so that it ends up being like this. You can see how nice that is. So a little effort to get that result. I'm going to tell you right now that this is going to look way better on the cabinet than this. So I've got some 120 grit on this. And this is my 5-inch sander. And I'm just going to hold it in there and I'm going to rock it back and forth. Okay, now that's really good. But now I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to blend it, make sure that there's no flat spots. As you can see, without this track here, it's pretty much impossible to do this kind of a sanding job because the piece just wants to go like that. But this keeps it really steady. Now, it's hard to say when you can't feel and see what I'm talking about, but when you have these ripples, it's just not good at all to paint or stain. You're just gonna see it. So don't just take this and go right to the job site. Just examine it and make sure that it's smooth because this is gonna show everything. And once you put this on, you caulk it, you paint it. What are you gonna do now? You're not gonna take it off. It's just gonna look terrible. All right, I've got this counter in here. I need to scribe it. So I'm gonna go ahead and put it up, get it in place, and then start working on the scribe. Should be the same as this overhang. Okay, it's exactly right. Double check this. Okay, now what I need to do is make sure that the front is equal. Now, you can measure it, but you can also look at the wall. The cabinet's actually touching the wall, so I know that it's going to be equal. Let me show you. See this right here? So right there, I know the cabinet's touching the wall, so this piece goes all the way back to the wall, and I'll be equal with it on the front. Because that's also touching the wall. So I push them back, they'll be equal. Should be able to take my scribes right here, already set up to the right dimension. let's just go off with this one and we'll make it exactly the same. And so right now we want to be inch and 5/16. Let's see what it is right now. That is a 2 3/16. I think. Yeah, 2 3/16. So we want to go down 7/8 of an inch. Is that right? Two and 3/16 to 1 5/16. Yeah. 7/8 of an inch is where I want to be. So if I want to be at 7/8 of an inch, I'm not just going to say go there, because what you want to factor in is the angle at which you're scribing at. So I probably am going to be more towards an inch here, which is going to yield about a 7/8 scribe. So watch this. You see how my angle is? Now if you can go vertical, you're going to be closer. But let me put a mark here. And let's measure that. So I want to take off 7/8 of an inch. Let's measure that. So that's 15/16. So if I subtract 1/16 from this number right here, which is an inch, I'll put it at 15/16. Right there, that's going to give me my mark. So get rid of that. Come in here, and I'm just going to put it on there and make sure that the point is touching the wall, and then check it. Just make sure. So now I'm going to measure that. All right, that's subtracting 7/8 of an inch. So we're good. Come across here, and I'll go down, and then keep this compass from collapsing as I do this. Just want to take it just like that. And keep that steady rate, pressure, and everything as you go across. And you'll notice this line is totally curved. I'm putting my finger inside here to keep it from collapsing. So I put it in there just to put pressure on it outside, and that keeps this guy from moving in. Now when you get to the end, just go down. Like that. That's it. Okay, so now you can see what that looks like right now. It's pretty bad, right? I mean, you would never want to leave this. Believe it or not, some people do leave this, and they'll say the putty guys will fill it. The painters. Crack up. All right, take this down outside, and we'll shape it outside. Okay, now unlike the last one that we did that was going to be covered by the upper cabinet, this one is not going to be covered. So this is all going to be exposed. So we want to make sure that this is nice and tight to the line. And it's just a perfect cut. So what I have to do is I'll start it with this, and then I'll fine tune it with my belt sander. see how this is square, and then it goes back and dives in there. And I orient the belt sander so that it pulls the material downward if possible, so it eliminates that upward motion so as to help it not pull the wood fibers up. Good. So we'll probably need to fine tune it, but so that's what that joint looks like pre-assembled. Looks good. I'm gonna leave those on there. Keep that the part that's going back towards the wall, keep it from dropping. I think we can let it go. Yeah. Try to use minimal nails, and reveal is so nice. And I'll tell you what, it's unusual that the ceilings and floors and everything in a house are somewhat level. And when you level a cabinet, a lot of times the ceiling is out of level. So the fact that this is level, the floor was pretty level, and it makes it that much simpler putting this on. Because if it wasn't, we'd have had to go to a level line and then either scribe the top of the molding to fit an uneven ceiling, or stretch the molding. And you can do that sometimes, but going around turns, it's not too easy. So let's say you're putting in some molding and you know that the joints seem like they're good, but they just don't seem to fit right. What's happening is this piece going back here is not level. It's actually going downhill. So it starts up high here and it goes down. So we want this to be level. So what you do is you take some shims on the other side. I think that a lot of people overlook that when you put in molding like this. You know, just because it's going around a square cabinet doesn't mean that the moldings are going to meet up squarely and perfectly. You have to make sure that the base molding is completely level with each other. And so I just take this shim with my pry bar and I'm just going to gently raise it until it's perfectly level. Now that guy's good there. Now you see what's happened with this joint is it completely closed in. And I'm going to put quick setting glue on this. However, I'm not going to use the activator. And another thing about this is that you want to make sure that you come up a little bit long and then work your way down to the joint. Shift to the right just a little bit, and that's going to perfectly align this joint. All right, now we've got perfectly flush joint. That's great. Check that fit on the cope, and that's just perfect. And now what I can do is I can mark the length right there. Now that's going to be an outside miter, so I'm going to put that witness mark like that. Shoe molding, and you can see I use the clamps there just to pull it tight. All right, this looks pretty good. Counter, it's hard to see, but because the glass is right here, but it looks pretty good. I did it the first time, and in a couple areas I didn't back cut it enough, so it was actually pointing out. So I was actually a little bit short. Again, just modifying it ever so slightly to get that fit, so that's really good. This guy right here. So I'll take these off and I'll make sure this is blended perfectly. Sometimes with this shoe molding, you'll get a difference in the thickness. Even though they're both touching the floor, you might get a little difference in thickness. And all the doors are fitted nicely. Everything looks really good. Doors are fitted. And when the painters come, they're going to be taking all this stuff off, and I know they're going to be adjusting it ever so slightly. So I'm not too critical about the actual perfect alignment, but it's pretty good. And of course the crown right there, that looks good. The scribes look good. And so the scribes, you know, that's just something that I like to do. Put that on. Sometimes I make the panels big and I can scribe off the panels, and this type of thing. But this works great. They're glued. You remember putting glue down there so that there's no movement, and that's really important because as you paint and stuff, you don't want there to be any movement. Well, just when I thought I was finished, I remembered that I never cleaned out the holes from the other side after drilling them. Remember I was telling you they get clogged up sometimes when you have double-sided holes? Well, all this was in the holes. So some of them were good, right? If you looked at them from one side, it'd be good, but you go to the other side and they're clogged up. Well, I completely forgot about it, and look. So this is what came out of the holes. So basically I just took a 3-inch screw, went through each one to clear it out, and so that's all you got to do. But it needs to be done.